Thomas here with Much Props, going to give you another how-to video. Today we are going to make a Mimic. Not from any particular one game, because it is definitely across a bunch of different franchises, from Dark Souls to Dungeons and Dragons to Dark and Darker to Final Fantasy. There's tons of them appearing all over. A lot of times they kind of stick to like chests, which are to lure people in, and that's what you typically see a lot of people building, are chest-like mimics. And while yes, I could definitely do that, I wanted to do it just a little bit different. Not to say that this has never been done before, but I wanted to make a simple box crate and make a Mimic out of it using nothing, well, almost nothing but scrap materials. I got a big old tub of stuff over there that I need to start piling through, and this could definitely be an easy build to do it with. No pattern necessary, it's just some simple measurements, and you've got yourself something that's hopefully gonna lure people in and creep people out. So without further ado, let's make a Mimic. I have tons of foam and tons of foam scraps laying around, so I thought I would bust out my barrel and burrow through the EVA. I want this box crate to be fairly ragged, so foam thickness is not a concern, so it doesn't need to be uniform. I cut the foam into various thicknesses, but all the same length. I settled on about 11 inches long or so that I could eventually put my head in it. I hadn't made that decision yet, but I do know that from doing the voiceover. The EVA ranges from 4mm to 10mm for my slats I'm using for the inset panels. Once I have all my strips cut out, it's time to make the foam resemble some cracked up and dried out wood. There are lots of methods you can use to achieve the desired texture. I use 5 different ones on each piece, trying to make it as random as possible. Box cutters can score nice even lines, scissors can make rough chunks, sanding discs not only remove quicker but leave a rough texture, stone bits can make smaller, smoother lines, and the wood burner will help me to gouge out areas quickly. You could also use texture rollers, texture presses, or just paint the wood grain on later. I spent about 3 hours working through enough strips to make 6 panels. With them all done, I try to randomize the spread of my big and little strips, vary thicknesses, and even the types of foam with some little differences. I contact cement the sides and stick them together once it's all dried. I repeat the process 6 times and then trim off a little on the height and width to make them nice, evenly, and square. A little trick to gluing up multiple sides at one time is to stack them on each other on a flat surface, pinch them together, and then glue the underside. Once done, just do the same thing in reverse for the other. No, I don't know that this is the best method for joining my sides together, but this is what I went with. I cut some 24mm foam into thick strips and glued them onto the sides. Only I didn't make the width 24 inches, so after gluing it up on 2 panels, I realized that the corresponding sides wouldn't line up fully. Wanting to make this as square as possible, I tried to cut thin pieces for 2 of the 4 edges and thick for the other 2, and eventually I realized this is getting way too complicated. It's a Mimic. It shouldn't be perfect. It doesn't matter if the parts don't match up perfectly. Just shove them together and fill up spots as you need to. Making the same 6-sided panels with beveled edges would make for nice crisp corners, but I'm far too committed at doing this the backwards way to go back now. With the edges forced into submission, I need to texture them now like I did the other strips. This is where I can get away with hiding seams and gaps with texture and holes. I was covered in dust for quite a while on this build. Make sure to wear a respirator and work in a well-ventilated area while sanding or burning foam. You don't want that stuff settling into your lungs or nasal passages. You'll be coughing and sneezing up abnormal colors for days, and that's a hard thing to explain to people who don't know you do this for a hobby. At this point, I decided I was going to make it a wearable for some reason. I don't know what my thought process was here. Maybe you could cosplay as a demon mid-morph into a Mimic, or the Mimic sprouted arms and legs, or you want to be that famous Minecrafter Cratehead. Sure, that's a thing, no need to look it up, just trust me, he's huge. I have this flexible ruler that fits around my giant dome. I wrapped it around, taped the ends together, and the wire in it maintains the shape perfectly of my fat head to transfer a hole onto it. Once cut out, just texture the edges and move on. You could also think of it like carving a jack-o'-lantern with a hole in the bottom instead of multiple clips of me doing similar stuff, and so I didn't have to explain how eye and mouth holes got there in the comments. I'm just combining clips here, saving time. Here, I'm just cutting a piece to go on the inside of the mouth hole, allowing to shove teeth and lips onto later. Little texturing, little burny burn, and we're good to gluey glue it on the inside. I might have bought a couple of these on the day after Halloween sale this year, just knowing that I would need them for such an occasion. They are meant to screw into the fleshy gums of a jack-o'-lantern, but will work just as good for my Mimic's fang implants. Gnawing on raw meat and bones can really take its toll on your teethus. I super glued them into place, then used clay foam to help bridge the gap and add some nasty texture to the gums growing over the wood panels. After I let the foam dry for a day, I went over the top of it with some hot glue, making some boils and veins here and there. One thing is for certain, this Mimic is not going to be short of textures. I like to use the low temp hot glue gun because high temp is like napalm. It'll eat right through your skin quickly. Some of my worst crafting injuries were second and third degree burns from dripping hot glue, and I have the battle scars as an ever reminder to stay as far away from this liquid hot Satan lava as possible. Two coats of Plasti-Dip. This monster took about 2 full cans to cover. Now to spray paint on a bunch of random shades of brown. I tried to make it darker on the bottom and lighter as I went towards the top. With most of the paint job out of the way from spray paint, I'm gonna just start putting on some black washes in all the recesses to dirty it up a bit. Let the watered down acrylic seep into all the cracks and crevices, then wipe away the high points with a paper towel. No matter how good my spray paint coverage was, you can still see a couple of little blue cracks here and there, so this is a chance to kind of hide those. To bring back some of the wood grain, I'm going to dry brush on lighter brown mixed with more and more white paint with each random pass. You're just trying to hit the high points. Once the wood grain is done, I hand paint over the growth areas with red, yellow, and blue. The last thing that I need to paint are these sharp, jagged teeth. I cover most of the tooth with yellow, leaving the edge up on the gum brown. Once I get to the end, I add a little bit of white to my paint and slowly transition from a wet brush to a dry brushing technique as I work lighter and lighter, making littler and littler contact with the teeth. Most of this will probably be covered up by blood, but for a brief clip, you can see these dirty candy corns on display. Once dried, I added a layer of 5-minute epoxy to the teeth and the red growth. I ran out of battery and didn't notice that it had stopped recording. You may have wondered why this guy only has top teeth. I decided that I wanted to have him mid-snack chomping on a hand, and those bottom teeth would have kind of just got in the way. You could definitely carve out your own hand in EVA phone. I've made a video where I made a mask doing just that, but for the sake of this and time, I'm going to use another cheap plastic prop I bought at a Halloween sale in bulk. I primed it gray and now am using a sponge with red, yellow, white, and blue to dab on a skin tone. You just want to make it as sporadic as possible because human skin tone is not a solid color. Just like the teeth, this probably won't be seen fully, so it's going to get a layer of blood. I'm not trying to be too precious with it. For the blood and attaching the hand to the mimic, I'm going to use some 5-minute epoxy. If you mix the epoxy with just a little bit of red and black acrylic paint, you can make it look like a pretty nice fresh blood. The benefit is that it always looks wet. I mix up the two parts, put in a little bit of the paint, and then slap my hands and mimic with sporadic slatherings of this slappy stuff. Make sure to wear some gloves and ventilate the room. This JB Weld stuff leaves a very nasty odor that you don't want to sit and huff for a very long time. I did this at the end of the night, cranked up my air filter on full blast, and let it do its thing. I wanted the eyes to glow a creepy red and have some glowing around the various holes around the crate. Keep in mind that it can also be worn, so I wanted to obstruct the person's eyes from the viewer. I cut a strip of some sheer black cloth and glued it on the inside of the eye holes. To diffuse the light from the LEDs a little bit, I'm going to use some blobs of hot glue as a platform. Then I hot glued them onto the inside of the fabric. After securing the rest of the bulbs into place strategically and making an elastic pouch for the battery, I can officially call this build done. And we are finished. Here's the end result. It's just a box with a creepy, creepy face on it that has light up eyes. I went ahead and took the rest of the string and kind of wired it around the mouth and a couple of little spots in the back so that when the lights were off, you could kind of have that glow effect coming out of the whole box. But yeah, not too terrible of a build, something relatively simple. You're basically just making a cube and then putting decorations on it. This could definitely be applied to other things like Minecraft or a number of other franchises that have like extra little boxes laying around. You could definitely do it up in whatever style you're trying to mimic. Yeah. Maybe you will try and make one of these yourselves and impress your friends with your ability to make some inanimate object monsterized and terrifying, and definitely get a hand from somebody else. Sorry, I can't stop. Maybe you'll get some.
Yay!
And inevitably, they're gonna ask you, how'd you make that? You can give them one of these, tell them, much props. If you don't feed them, then they get really unhappy. So I know he's got a hand already, but he could use a thigh or a liver or something. So suck it up. If you enjoy what I do here on YouTube and want to continue to see builds like this one, please consider joining these awesome people listed here with me over on my Patreon to build a bigger, better, more creative community together.